2 hours after the $20 bill landed in a puddle at my feet, Caleb's phone buzzed in the middle of a 5-star steakhouse. His face crumpled like someone had just siphoned the oxygen out of his lungs. I was not there to see it. I was curled up on a city bus in the rain, clutching my 3-day-old son against my fresh surgical stitches, finally understanding that some men only love you when they think you are powerless. My name is Peyton Smith, and at 34 years old, standing under the weeping gray overhang of the Rainford General Hospital discharge exit, I felt less like a new mother and more like a survivor of a shipwreck who had just been washed ashore on a hostile island. The automatic doors slid shut behind me with a final, dismissive hiss, severing the connection to the sterile, climate-controlled world where nurses checked my vitals and painkillers were administered on a schedule. Out here, in the Northgate district, the reality of the Pacific Northwest winter was waiting to assault me. The air was heavy, smelling of wet concrete, exhaust fumes, and that peculiar, metallic scent of cold rain that never seems to stop in this part of the country. It was not a storm. Exactly. It was a relentless, soaking misery that seeped into the bones. I tightened my grip on the bundle in my arms. My son was only 3 days old. He was a tiny, fragile thing, sleeping the deep sleep of the innocent, completely unaware that his introduction to the outside world was going to be a test of endurance. I pulled the edge of the thick woolen blanket up over his face, shielding him from the mist that swirled around us. Every breath I took was a negotiation with pain. The C-section incision across my lower abdomen was a line of fire that burned with every minute movement. Standing upright felt unnatural, as if my body had forgotten its own center of gravity. I could feel the internal stitches pulling, a sensation of tight wires threatening to snap if I twisted the wrong way. The nurse, a kind woman named Sarah, who had brought me down in the wheelchair, had lingered in the doorway for a moment too long. She had seen me pause. She had seen the way my hand hovered protectively over my stomach. "Is your ride here, Mrs. Smith?" she had asked, her voice laced with that professional concern that masks pity. "I can wait with you until he pulls up. He is just parking." I had lied. My voice did not tremble. I had made sure of that. "He is right around the corner. He wanted to get the car close so the baby does not get wet. You know how fathers are." I had smiled then. A tight, thin expression that I hoped looked like fond exasperation rather than desperate cover. I needed her to leave. I could not bear the weight of a stranger's sympathy. This was the last bastion of my self-respect, the ability to pretend that I was part of a normal functioning family unit. Sarah had nodded, bought the lie, and returned to her duties, leaving me alone on the curb. So I stood there, shifting my weight from one swollen foot to the other, watching the traffic slice through the puddles on the street. My phone was buried deep in my bag, but I did not need to check it. Caleb knew I was being discharged. The time had been set for 2 hours ago. I had waited in the room until the administration staff started making polite noises about needing the bed. Then, I saw it. The black SUV turned the corner like a shark entering a school of fish. It was Caleb's pride, a vehicle that cost more than the average annual salary in Rainford. The paint was so polished it looked like liquid obsidian, reflecting the bleak hospital lights and the gray sky in distorted, expensive swirls. It glided toward the drop-off zone, silent and imposing. Relief washed over me, instant and overwhelming. He was here. He was late, but he was here. I took a step forward, and the sudden motion sent a jolt of agony through my midsection that made me gasp. I bit my lip, tasting iron, and composed myself. Caleb hated scenes. He hated weakness. I had to look presentable. The SUV rolled to a stop right in front of me. I waited for the driver's side door to open. I waited for Caleb to step out, perhaps in that charcoal suit he loved, to rush around the front of the car, take the heavy hospital bag from my shoulder, and help me into the passenger seat. I waited for the umbrella. I waited for the basic choreography of a husband picking up his wife and newborn son. The driver's door did not open. Instead, the tinted window on the passenger side hummed down with a smooth, mechanical purr. The sudden opening released a rush of warm, dry air from inside the cabin, carrying the rich scent of conditioned leather and Caleb's cedarwood cologne. It was a smell of luxury, of safety, of a world I was supposed to belong to. But Caleb was not looking at me. He was behind the wheel, his hands gripping the leather at 10 and 2. His profile sharp and rigid. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched. The passenger seat was occupied. Darlene Rowe, my mother-in-law, shifted in the seat, adjusting her oversized designer sunglasses even though there was not a ray of sun within 500 miles. She turned her head slowly, looking me up and down as if I were a piece of furniture that had been left out on the curb for trash collection. "Oh, look at her," Darlene said, her voice carrying easily over the sound of the rain. It was not a whisper, it was a performance. "She looks absolutely washed out. And look at that bag. Caleb, it has been on the hospital floor. You know what kind of bacteria thrives on hospital floors. It is practically a petri dish." From the back seat, a flash of light went off. I looked past Darlene to see Brielle, Caleb's sister. She had her phone raised. The camera lens pointed directly at me. She was not smiling. She was checking her angle, making sure the frame captured the dreary background. My pale face, the wet pavement. She was creating content. I was not a person to them. I was a prop in the ongoing reality show of their lives. "Caleb," I said. My voice sounded small in the damp air. "Caleb, can you pop the trunk?" Caleb finally turned his head. He did not look at my eyes. He looked at the baby wrapped in the blanket. Then his gaze dropped to my sweatpants, specifically to the small, dark spot on my thigh where the incision had leaked a tiny amount of fluid earlier that morning. It was barely visible, but Caleb saw it. I saw his nostrils flare slightly. It was a look of distaste. He looked from me to the pristine, cream-colored leather interior of his SUV. He was weighing the variables. On one side, his wife and 3-day-old son. On the other side, the integrity of his car's interior and the image he needed to project. The interior was just detailed yesterday. "Peyton," Caleb said. His tone was conversational, indifferent, as if he were explaining why he could not eat spicy food. "I have that dinner with the investors at Glasswater Pier in 2 hours. I cannot show up smelling like medical supplies, and that stain I cannot risk the leather. It is porous. You know that." I stood frozen, the rain beginning to soak through the shoulders of my coat. "Caleb, I just had surgery. I cannot walk home." "I am not asking you to walk," he said, sounding annoyed that I was making this difficult. "There is a bus stop right there at the corner. The number 42 goes straight to the district. It is a direct line. Honestly, it is probably better for the baby. The suspension on the bus is softer than the sport tuning on this truck. You do not want to jostle him." "You are joking," I whispered. "Don't be dramatic, Peyton," Darlene chimed in, inspecting her manicured fingernails. "It is just a 20-minute ride. People do it every day. You wanted to be a modern, independent mother, didn't you? Well, here is your chance." Caleb reached into the center console. I watched his hand, that familiar hand with the wedding band I had placed there, as he pulled out a bill. It was a $20 bill. He did not lean across Darlene to hand it to me. He did not apologize. He simply rolled down his window a crack more, crumpled the bill in his fist, and tossed it out. The wind caught the green paper immediately. It fluttered erratically, dancing in the air for a heartbeat before slapping down into a muddy puddle near the front tire. The water was dark with oil and street grit. The face of Andrew Jackson drowned in the grime. "That should cover the fare and a coffee," Caleb said. "Take the bus. It will save the seats. I will see you at home later." "And try not to track mud into the foyer when you get in," Darlene added, reaching for the button to roll up the window. The glass slid up, sealing them back into their warm, expensive bubble. I stood there, the rain now matting my hair against my forehead. The engine revved, a deep, throaty growl of power, and the SUV pulled away from the curb. The tires hissed on the wet asphalt, spraying a fine mist of dirty water over my sneakers as they merged into traffic and disappeared toward the city center. I was alone. The silence that followed was louder than the city traffic. I looked down at the puddle. The $20 bill was still there, soaking up the filth of the Northgate district. My first instinct was to leave it. I wanted to turn around, walk back into the hospital, and scream until someone listened. I wanted to let the money dissolve into pulp. I did not need his $20. I had my own accounts, my own life before this, or at least I thought I did. But then, a cold clarity settled over me, sharper than the wind. If I left the money, it was just a piece of trash. If I picked it up, it was evidence. It was a physical manifestation of exactly what I was worth to Caleb Rowe. It was the price tag he had put on the safety of his wife and child. I shifted the baby to my left arm, gritting my teeth against the pull of the stitches. I bent my knees slowly, agonizingly. The pain tore through my midsection. A white-hot reminder of the major surgery I had undergone less than 72 hours ago. My breath hitched in short, shallow gasps. I reached down into the cold, oily water. My fingers closed around the wet paper. It felt slimy and gross. I straightened up, trembling not from the cold, but from the sheer effort of existing in this moment. I did not wipe the bill off. I did not try to clean it. I squeezed it in my fist, letting the dirty water drip down my wrist and into the sleeve of my coat. I looked down the street where the taillights of the SU-5 had vanished. 2 seconds passed. In those 2 seconds, the old Peyton, the one who tried to keep the peace, the one who made excuses for his stress, the one who desperately wanted to be part of the Rowe family dynasty, died on that sidewalk. I did not cry. Tears were a luxury for women who were being picked up in warm cars. I turned my collar up against the wind, clutched my son tighter to my chest, and began the slow, painful shuffle toward the bus stop. I would remember this. I would remember the rain. I would remember the pain. And most of all, I would remember the $20. The 50 yards from the hospital curb to the bus shelter felt less like a walk and more like a slow, deliberate act of self-torture. Every step sent a fresh shockwave radiating from my lower abdomen, a sensation like a hot steel wire being pulled taut through my skin. I moved with a terrifying slowness. My body hunched protectively over the bundle in my arms. I did not care about the rain soaking my hair or the water seeping into my sneakers. My entire universe had shrunk to the temperature of the tiny body pressed against my chest. I tucked the flap of my coat over his head, creating a small, warm pocket of air, shielding him from the Northgate district's toxic gray mist. He was the only thing that mattered. I would have walked through fire to keep him dry. Walking through a Rainford downpour was a negligible price to pay. The bus shelter was a graffiti-etched glass box that smelled of stale urine and damp tobacco. It offered minimal protection against the wind that whipped around the corner. I leaned against the cold metal frame, counting the seconds between breaths, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I could not collapse. Not here, not now. When the number 42 finally groaned to a halt in front of me, it was already packed. The doors hissed open, releasing a blast of humid, recycled air that smelled of wet wool, fast food, and the collective exhaustion of 50 strangers. I climbed the steps, gritting my teeth so hard my jaw ached. The driver, a man with tired eyes and a thick neck, barely glanced at me as I scanned my transit card. It beeped a low, mournful tone. I moved down the aisle. The bus was a microcosm of the city's working class at rush hour. There were students with headphones glued to their ears, nurses with dark circles under their eyes scrolling mindlessly through feeds, and construction workers covered in drywall dust staring blankly at the advertisements for personal injury lawyers above the windows. No one looked up. No one saw the woman clutching a newborn, her face pale and slick with rain, her hand pressing against a surgical wound. This was the modern American reality, the gig economy fatigue, where empathy was just another resource that had been depleted by the end of the shift. Everyone was in their own survival mode, encased in invisible bubbles of noise-canceling audio and blue light. The bus lurched forward, and I stumbled, my shoulder slamming into a yellow pole. A sharp cry escaped my lips before I could stifle it. "Here, you take this." The voice came from my right. A man stood up from one of the priority seats near the front. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, wearing a faded mechanic's jacket with a name patch that read Leon. His hands were stained with grease that no amount of scrubbing would ever fully remove, and his face was mapped with deep lines of hardship. He did not look like someone who had anything to give. He looked like he had been on his feet for 12 hours. "Please," I started to protest, my pride flickering weakly. "I am fine." "Sit down, ma'am," Leon said, his voice firm but gentle. He gestured to the plastic seat with a courtly grace that belonged to a different era. "You have got a little one there, and you look like you are about to fall over." I sank into the seat, the relief so profound, it nearly made me dizzy. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you so much." He nodded once, touching the brim of a worn baseball cap, and grabbed the overhead strap, swaying with the rhythm of the bus. I looked at him, Leon Briggs, a man who probably counted every dollar to make rent, and then I thought of Caleb, who had just spent more on detailing his car than Leon likely made in a week. The contrast was a physical nausea in my gut. Genuine kindness, I was realizing, often came from those who knew exactly what it felt like to have nothing. It was not a commodity for the rich. It was a survival mechanism for the poor. The bus rumbled on, stopping every few blocks to swallow more wet. Tired souls. I adjusted the blanket around my son, checking for the 10th time that he was breathing comfortably. He was warm, dry, and safe. That was the only victory I had claimed today. With the baby settled, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen had a hairline crack running diagonally across the top corner, a scar from when I had dropped it months ago and Caleb had told me to just make do until the new models came out. I tapped the screen to check the time, but a notification banner blocked the clock. It was an Instagram alert. Brielle_official is live. Celebration dinner, Uncle Caleb's success family first. My thumb hovered over the notification. I knew I should not open it. I knew it was emotional self-harm. But the morbid curiosity, the need to confirm the depth of the betrayal, forced my hand. I tapped the banner, the screen filled with the warm, golden ambiance of the steakhouse at Glasswater Pier. The lighting was low and expensive, designed to flatter the clientele. The camera was shaking slightly as Brielle adjusted the angle, panning across the table. I saw the crisp white tablecloths, the crystal wine glasses that caught the light, and the centerpiece of fresh orchids. "Hey guys," Brielle's voice was high-pitched, performing for her 4,000 followers. "We are here at the pier, celebrating my brother's massive week. Look at this spread." She turned the camera to Caleb. He was sitting at the head of the table, holding a menu bound in leather. He looked relaxed, in his element. The tension that had been in his jaw outside the hospital was gone, replaced by the smooth, practiced smile of a man who believes he owns the room. He raised a glass of amber liquid, probably the 20-year-old scotch he preferred to the camera. "To success," Caleb said smoothly, "and to not smelling like antiseptic," Darlene's voice cut in from off-screen. Brielle panned the camera to her mother. Darlene was inspecting a seafood tower with critical approval. "Honestly, Brielle, that car ride was suffocating. I thought I was going to catch something just breathing the air in that hospital zone. I told Caleb, you cannot bring that energy to a place like this." "Totally," Brielle laughed, flipping her hair. "Plus, the vibe here is so much better. No crying babies, no drama, just quality." She leaned in closer to the phone, whispering conspiratorially to her audience. "My sister-in-law is, super intense about the whole mom thing already. It is a bit much. We tried to give her a ride, but she was all about, I can do it myself. So, we let her." I watched the comments roll up the side of the screen. LMAO, imagine taking the bus after giving birth. Your brother is hot, though. Ew, hospital smell is the worst. She sounds cheap. Good call leaving her. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning on the bus. They were not just abandoning me, they were consuming me. They were turning my pain into content. I was the punchline to their evening of luxury. Is she okay, though? Caleb asked in the background. It sounded like a question, but the tone was dismissive, like asking if it was still raining outside. She is fine, Cal, Brielle said, waving a hand. She is tough, or stubborn, probably just stubborn. She is from that weird little town. Remember, they are used to roughing it. Caleb chuckled, a sound that vibrated through the tiny speaker of my phone and pierced straight into my heart. He took a sip of his scotch, looking directly into the camera lens as if he could see me sitting on the plastic seat of the number 42. She wants independence, Caleb said, his voice dropping an octave, putting on his serious CEO voice. I am a feminist. I believe in empowering women. If she wants to do it alone, I am going to let her try. It is a learning experience. Let her try. The phrase hung in the air between us, suspended over the digital connection. It was not a statement of support. It was a dare. It was a cruel, calculated test. He was throwing me into the deep end to see if I would drown, confident that when I inevitably gasped for air, I would come crawling back to him, grateful for whatever scraps of attention he deigned to give. I did not cry. The tears that had threatened to fall earlier had evaporated, burned away by a sudden, intense flash of clarity. I looked at Caleb's face on the screen, the arrogance, the comfort, the absolute certainty that he held all the cards. He thought he was teaching me a lesson. He thought he was stripping me of my resources. He had forgotten who I was before I became Mrs. Rowe. I tapped the screen and muted the live stream. I did not close it. I let it play in silence. A flickering testament to their hubris, I minimized the app and opened my contacts. I scrolled past the family group chat, past the local friends who were really Caleb's friends, and found a number I had not dialed in 2 years. It was saved simply as DK. I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, then a click. Peyton, a deep, gravelly voice answered. There was no hesitation, no hello, no surprise. It was the voice of a man who was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. It has been 730 days. I know. Darius, I said. My voice was steady. It did not sound like the voice of a woman on a bus. It sounded like iron cooling after being forged. I am sorry for the silence. We do not need apologies, Darius King replied. We need status. Where are you? I am on a bus heading north, I said. My eyes fixed on the rain streaking the window. Caleb and his family are at Glasswater Pier. They just left me and the baby at the hospital curb. They are spending money on a celebration dinner while I use a $20 bill he threw at me to pay for transit. There was a silence on the other end. But it was not empty. It was the heavy silence of a predator calculating the wind direction. Are you safe? Darius asked. For now, but I am done. Darius, I am done playing the trophy. I am done playing the grateful wife. I took a breath, inhaling the smell of wet strangers, and let it out slowly. I want to initiate the protocol. Which one? Darius asked. We drafted 3 contingencies. The total lockdown, I said. Activate the financial lock protocol under the Trust Authority. Section 8, Paragraph 4, breach of marital duty and endangerment of heir. That is the nuclear option. Peyton, Darius said, his voice remaining flat, professional. Once we turn that key, the liquidity freezes, the credit lines detach, the assets under the holding company revert to the trust oversight. It will not just embarrass him. It will eviscerate his current operating status. He told me he wanted me to be independent, I said, watching the digital image of Caleb laughing with a waiter on my minimized screen. I am just giving him exactly what he asked for. I am removing my support, all of it. Understood, Darius said. I could hear the typing of a keyboard in the background, fast and rhythmic. I need verbal confirmation for the voice print record. Do you, Peyton Smith, acting as the primary trustee and silent partner of the Smith Rowe Venture Trust, authorize the immediate suspension of all beneficiary privileges for Caleb Rowe? I authorize it, I said. Effective immediately. Done. The servers are updating now. By the time the waiter brings the check, his world will be different. Thank you, Darius. Peyton, he added. Just before hanging up, welcome back. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and looked out the window. The city was blurring past, a smear of neon lights and shadows. I was still sitting on a crowded bus. My body still ached, and I was still holding a newborn in a world that felt hostile. But the map in my head had changed. I was no longer a passenger on a journey to nowhere. I looked down at my son. He shifted in his sleep, a tiny hand curling into a fist. It is okay, I whispered to him, soft enough that even Leon couldn't hear. Daddy thinks he is the king of the castle because he has the keys, but he forgot who built the castle. I settled back against the hard plastic seat, clutching the phone like a detonator. The bus rattled over a pothole, but I didn't flinch. I just watched the live stream, waiting for the moment the check would arrive, waiting for the invisible noose I had just tightened to catch. The ride was long, but I had nowhere else to be. I was exactly where I needed to be in the shadows, watching the light go out. Through the cracked screen of my phone, the drama at Glasswater Pier was unfolding with the crisp, high-definition clarity of a slow-motion car crash. I sat wedged between the window and the sleeping form of Leon Briggs, who had dozed off 2 stops ago, but my entire consciousness was projected into that restaurant. The check arrived on a small, leather-bound tray. It was the moment Caleb lived for. In the grand theater of his life, paying the bill was the climax. The scene where he solidified his status as the provider, the captain of industry, the man who could casually drop half a mortgage payment on a Tuesday night dinner and not blink. Get this. Brielle, Caleb said, gesturing to his sister with a loose, intoxicated wave of his hand. Make sure you get the total. People need to know we do not cut corners. Brielle zoomed in. The camera focus adjusted, sharpening on the receipt. The total was $480.50. A staggering amount for 3 people on a Tuesday, especially considering the bottle of vintage Cabernet they had ordered. And a 20% tip, Caleb announced, his voice booming slightly too loud for the hushed atmosphere of the steakhouse. Because we appreciate service, right? We take care of people. He reached into the inner pocket of his blazer, the blazer I had picked out for him last Christmas, and withdrew his wallet. With a flourish that was practiced and precise, he slid out the black card. It was a heavy, metal-plated card, the kind that made a distinct thwack when it hit the table. It was his talisman. It was the key to the city, or at least, it had been until 3 minutes ago. Put it on the black, Caleb told the waiter. A young man with slicked-back hair who looked exhausted by their antics. The waiter took the card and the tray. He stepped back, pulling a handheld terminal from his apron. Brielle kept the camera rolling, narrating for her audience. Black card energy only. Guys, if your man is not treating you like this, is he even your man? The waiter inserted the chip. There was a pause, a long, stretching silence that seemed to vibrate through the phone speaker. Then, a sharp, dissonant beep. The waiter frowned, pulled the card out, wiped the chip on his apron, and inserted it again. Beep. Is there a problem? Caleb asked, his smile faltering just a fraction at the corners. I am sorry, sir, the waiter said, his voice low. The card was declined. Declined. Caleb laughed, a harsh barking sound. That is impossible. That card has a limit higher than your annual salary. Try it again. It is probably your Wi-Fi. The comments section on the live stream, which had been full of fire emojis and hearts, suddenly shifted tone, declined oof, awkward. Did he forget to pay the bill? Secondhand embarrassment is real right now. The waiter tried a third time. Beep. It is giving a issuer restriction code, sir. Do you have another form of payment? Caleb's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. He snatched the card back, glaring at it as if the plastic had personally insulted him. "This is ridiculous. It is a bank error. Fine, whatever." He dug back into his wallet. "Use the Platinum Visa." He handed over the second card. This was the one linked to the joint operating account, the one I used for household expenses before he took it away for safekeeping. The waiter inserted it. Beep. Declined. "What is going on?" Darlene hissed, leaning in. Her face was a mask of irritation rather than concern. "Caleb, fix this. People are looking." "I am trying. Mother," Caleb snapped. The veneer of the cool CEO was cracking, revealing the panicked child beneath. He threw a third card on the tray, a corporate expense card. Beep. Declined. The chat was moving so fast now I could barely read it. "Is this a prank?" "He is broke. CEO of Empty Pockets. Brielle, stop filming. This is tragic." But Brielle did not stop filming. She was frozen, her hand shaking. Caught in the headlights of social media disaster, she knew that ending the stream now would look like an admission of guilt. So she just kept the camera pointed at the train wreck, paralyzed by her own need for attention. A shadow fell over the table. A man in a sharp, tailored suit stepped into the frame. I recognized him instantly, Rafael Ortiz, the general manager of Glasswater Pier. I had met him years ago at a charity gala. He was a man of immense discretion and steel-spine professionalism. "Mr. Rowe," Rafael said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise of the restaurant like a scalpel. "Is there an issue with the payment?" "Your machines are broken," Caleb accused, standing up. He was trying to use his height to intimidate, but he just looked desperate. "I have tried 3 cards. All declined. You need to reset your system." "Our system is functioning perfectly, sir," Rafael replied calmly. "Every other transaction tonight has processed without incident. It appears the issue is with your accounts." "That is a lie," Darlene shrieked. She slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "Do you know who we are? My son is a tech innovator. This is slander. I will have your job for this." "Ma'am, please lower your voice," Rafael said, his expression hardening. "Your bill is $480. We need to settle this now, or I will have to involve security." Security? The word hung in the air. Caleb looked around the room. The other diners were staring. The whispers were starting. The illusion of power he had crafted so carefully was dissolving in real time. "Look," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. He was sweating now, beads of perspiration shining on his forehead under the restaurant lights. "I do not know what is happening with the bank. Maybe a fraud hold or something. I will sort it out in the morning. Here." He unclasped the heavy gold watch from his wrist. "Take this as collateral. It is a Patek Philippe Nautilus. It is worth $60,000. Keep it in your safe. I will come back tomorrow with cash." He held the watch out to Rafael with a trembling hand, looking like a man offering a crown jewel to a pawnbroker. I held my breath on the bus. That watch. He had come home with it 6 months ago, boasting about a bonus, about a secret deal he had closed. He had strutted around the house with it, flashing it at dinner parties. Rafael did not take the watch. He leaned in, squinting slightly at the timepiece in Caleb's palm. He did not need a loop. He did not need to consult an expert. Rafael Ortiz had been managing luxury establishments for 30 years. He knew quality. "Mr. Rowe," Rafael said, and this time, there was a distinctive chill in his tone. "I cannot accept that." "Why not?" Caleb demanded. "It is worth 10 times the bill." "Because it is a replica, sir," Rafael said. He said it loud enough for the table next to them to hear, loud enough for the microphone on Brielle's phone to pick up. "The bezel setting is incorrect, and the sweep of the second hand is consistent with a quartz movement, not an automatic. It is a high-quality fake." "But it is a fake. It has no collateral value." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the death blow. Caleb stood there, his hand still outstretched, holding the fake watch that was suddenly a perfect metaphor for his entire existence. The comments on the screen exploded. "Fake watch, OMG. He is a fraud. The tea is scorching. This is the best live ever. Darlene looked at her son as if he had just vomited on her shoes. Caleb, you told me that was an investment piece. I got it from a dealer in Miami, Caleb stammered, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that did not exist. He must have duped me. I did not know, but the lie was weak. We all knew, somewhere, deep down, he had always known. He was a man who bought the image, not the substance. I need identification, Raphael said. His patience evaporated. And I need you to sign a promissory note for the debt. If it is not paid within 24 hours, we will file a theft of services report with the Rainford Police Department. Do not make me sign that, Caleb pleaded, his voice cracking. Please, not here. Mr. Rowe, now, Brielle finally panicked. She fumbled with the phone, and the screen went into a dizzying spin as she tried to hide the camera, pointing it at the floor, at the tablecloth, anywhere but at the humiliation of her brother surrendering his driver's license like a delinquent teenager caught shoplifting. End the stream. Brielle, Caleb roared. A sound of pure, unfiltered rage. The screen went black. Live ended. I sat staring at the reflection of my own face in the darkened glass of my phone. The bus rattled on, the rain drumming a steady rhythm against the roof. I felt a vibration in my hand, a text message. It was from Darius. Accounts frozen. Trust override engaged. Legal notice sent to his primary email. It is done. 2 sentences. No exclamation points. No questions. Just the cold, hard mechanics of consequences. I looked down at the diaper bag on my lap. Slowly, methodically. I unzipped the front pocket. I reached into my coat and pulled out the $20 bill. It was still damp, the edges soft and crinkled from the puddle water. It smelled of street dirt. I took a small, clear Ziploc bag, one I usually kept for pacifiers, and smoothed the bill out inside it. I sealed the plastic shut, pressing out the air. It was no longer money. It was an artifact. It was Exhibit A in the trial of Caleb Rowe versus reality. I did not feel happy. Happiness is warm. It is light. What I felt was a deep, Arctic satisfaction, the kind that comes from watching a balanced equation finally resolve itself. He had tried to buy his dignity with a fake watch and a declined card. While I rode a bus paid for with the insult he had thrown at me, the bus began to slow as we approached the outer suburbs. I looked out the window one last time. In my mind's eye, I could see the scene at Glasswater Pier. I could see them being escorted out the back entrance to avoid the staring guests. I could see them standing under the awning, the valet bringing the car around the car that, unbeknownst to them, was likely already flagged in the leasing company's system. I imagined Caleb standing there, stripped of the lights, the applause, and the audience, just a man in a wetsuit with a fake watch and a mother who despised failure. The rain would be hitting him now, just as it had hit me, but he had no coat to shield him, and unlike me, he had no one left to call. The dominoes had started to fall, and the sound they made was beautiful. I did not witness the interior of the SUV that night with my own eyes. I was miles away, watching the city blur past a bus window. But in the age of digital surveillance and litigation, privacy is an illusion, especially for a man like Caleb Rowe, who leased his vehicle through a company account that was now under forensic audit. I obtained the cabin audio logs and the dashcam footage during the discovery phase of our divorce proceedings. I have listened to that 40-minute drive enough times to memorize the rhythm of his breathing. I know exactly how a man sounds when the artificial gravity holding his world together suddenly shuts off. The recording began with the heavy, vacuum-sealed thud of the driver's side door slamming shut. The sound cut off the noise of the rain and the humiliation of the restaurant, sealing Caleb, Darlene, and Brielle inside a climate-controlled capsule of leather and ambient lighting. For the first 10 seconds, the only sound was the frantic, rhythmic swishing of the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. "It is a glitch," Caleb said. His voice was tight, pitched slightly higher than his usual baritone. He was talking to the steering wheel. "It is just a banking server error. The systems go down for maintenance. It happens. It is a glitch. It was embarrassing. Caleb, Darlene snapped from the passenger seat. I could hear the rustle of her adjusting her coat, pulling it away from her body as if the very air inside the car was contaminated by failure. Do you know who was at the table next to us, the editor of Rainford Style? If she prints that you could not pay for a steak, we are finished socially. I said it is a glitch. Mother, Caleb shouted. He hit the steering wheel with the heel of his hand, a dull, fleshy thud. I will call the concierge line right now. They will fix it. They will apologize. He did not get the chance to make the call. The car's Bluetooth system chimed, overriding the silence with a sharp, electronic ringtone. The dashboard screen lit up. The name displayed was Marcus, Venture Partners. See? Caleb let out a breathy, desperate laugh. Marcus is calling, probably to confirm the capital injection for next quarter. Everything is fine. Everyone calm down. He pressed the answer button on the steering wheel. Marcus, good evening. I was just about to... Caleb, stop. The voice on the other end was not friendly. It was not the warm, clubby tone of a man calling to talk about golf and dividends. It was the voice of a man reading a legal script. We are executing the clawback clause on the Series B funding, effective immediately. The silence in the car was absolute. Even the rain seemed to pause. What? Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus, we have a contract. You cannot just... We can, Marcus interrupted, his voice cold and metallic through the speakers. We received a compliance alert regarding significant governance risks and potential misappropriation of funds in your operating accounts. Under the Morality and Ethics rider in your contract Section 14, Paragraph B, we are withdrawing all commitments. We are also freezing the current tranche of $2 million until an independent audit is completed. Misappropriation. Caleb choked on the word. That is insane. Who sent you an alert? Was it a competitor? The alert came from your primary trust compliance officer. Caleb, Marcus said. We do not gamble on compromised CEOs. Do not call this number again until your lawyers have spoken to ours. The line went dead. The disconnect tone hummed in the air like a flat line. Caleb did not move. On the footage, his hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. The compliance officer. He had heard the title, but he had not processed the person. He had forgotten who actually held that title. Before he could process the blow, the system chimed again. Jessica, ops manager. Caleb stared at the screen. He looked like a man watching a bomb timer count down. He pressed the button. Caleb. Thank God. Jessica's voice filled the cabin. She was hyperventilating. I could hear the chaos of the office in the background, phones ringing. People shouting. You need to get here. Now. I am driving. Jessica, calm down. What is happening? The payroll batch just bounced, she screamed. All of it. 150 employees just got notifications that their direct deposits were reversed. My Slack is exploding, and Caleb, the auditors are here. What auditors? The IRS and the State Franchise Board. They have a warrant for a spot audit on the lease agreements and the tax shelters. They are tagging the computers. They said the shielding entity has dissolved its protection status. That is impossible, Caleb stammered. The shelter is solid. Peyton set it up, He trailed off. The name hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. And the landlord is here, Jessica continued, her voice breaking. He says the auto pay for the building lease was rejected for insufficient funds. He is threatening to lock the doors by midnight if we do not wire $40,000. Caleb, what do I do? Tell them to wait, Caleb roared, sweat visible on his forehead in the dashboard lights. Tell them it is a mistake, I'm coming. He slammed his finger on the end call button, disconnecting her. He was panting now, short, shallow breaths that fogged up the windshield. Payroll, Brielle's voice piped up from the back seat. She did not sound worried about the employees. She sounded annoyed. Wait, if the accounts are weird, does that mean my allowance transfer is going to be late? Caleb, I have a brand collaboration payment due tomorrow. If I do not pay the photographer, he deletes the raw files. My image will be ruined. Your image? Caleb spun around in his seat, ignoring the road for a terrifying second. Brielle, the company is collapsing. The IRS is raiding the office. Well, do not yell at me, Brielle shrieked back. This is your job. You are the genius businessman. Fix it. I cannot look poor. Caleb, I literally cannot. I have a reputation. And what about me? Darlene interjected, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. Caleb, the mortgage on the guest house comes out of that same account. If that bounces, the club will know. They will revoke my membership. You promised me that the trust covered everything. You said it was airtight. Shut up, Caleb screamed. Both of you, just shut up. He was spiraling. I could see it in the way his eyes darted from the road to the dashboard to his phone. He was a rat in a maze where the walls were suddenly moving. He needed to gain control. He needed to log in. I can fix this, he muttered to himself. I just need to access the admin portal. I need to override the freeze. He pulled his personal phone out of his pocket while steering with his knees, a reckless move that perfectly mirrored his approach to life. He tapped the icon for the company's banking app. Face ID recognized, the robotic voice of the phone announced. Please enter 6-digit two-factor authentication code. Caleb froze. He stared at the screen. He tapped resend code. Nothing happened. He tapped send to backup number. The phone beeped. Code sent to device ending in 9888. Caleb stared at the number. His face went slack. 9888. That was not his number. That was not Jessica's number. Wait, he whispered. That is... He tried the email recovery option. Recovery link sent to secure compliance email. Smith_compliance. He dropped the phone into his lap as if it had burned him. This was the detail he had overlooked for 5 years. This was the 30% difference between a partner and a parasite. When we started the company, Caleb wanted the glory. He wanted the meetings, the handshakes, the magazine covers. He hated the paperwork. He hated the compliance. He hated the tedious, unglamorous work of setting up security protocols and trust structures. So he had delegated it. He had signed a power of attorney granting me full administrative oversight on digital security and compliance because he couldn't be bothered to remember passwords. He had set up the 2FA to route to me because he didn't want his phone buzzing during meetings. He was locked out of his own life, and the only key was in the pocket of a woman he had just left standing in the rain. Peyton, he whispered. It was the first time he had said my name without a sneer in months. Peyton has the codes. Well, call her, Darlene demanded. Tell her to send the code. God, she is probably just sulking on that bus. Call her and tell her to stop playing games. Caleb looked at his mother. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown out with fear. You do not understand. Mother, she is not playing games. He turned back to the road, his mind racing. Trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, he was remembering. I could almost see the synapses firing on the dashcam video. He was remembering the tax audit 3 years ago that magically went away because I stayed up for 3 nights straight organizing the files. He was remembering the lawsuit from the vendor that disappeared because I found a loophole in the contract. He was remembering every time he had signed a document without reading it, saying, "Just handle it, babe. You are good at the details." She handled the details, Caleb said, his voice hollow. She handled all of them. What are you talking about? Brielle asked, scrolling through her phone, probably deleting comments. The trust, Caleb said, talking to himself now. The investors, the lease, the security. It is all her. It was always her. I thought she was just the secretary. I thought she was just the wife. He realized then that he was not the engine of his own success. He was the hood ornament, and the engine had just detached itself from the car. The fear that washed over his face was primal. It was not the fear of losing money. It was the fear of the unknown. He realized he did not actually know who Peyton Smith was. He knew the woman who cooked dinner. He knew the woman who nodded at his stories. But he did not know the woman who could dismantle a corporation in under an hour from a city bus. "She planned this," he whispered. "She did not just react. She executed. The lockouts happened the second I left the restaurant. The investor called the second I got in the car. This is a script." He looked at his hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. He looked at the leather interior of the SUV, the symbol of his status, and realized it was a cage. He was trapped in a box that he didn't own, driving to a house he couldn't pay for, with a family that would eat him alive the moment the credit card stopped working. The silence returned to the car, but this time it was heavy with the weight of a guillotine blade waiting to drop. Darlene and Brielle had fallen silent, perhaps sensing the radioactive levels of fear radiating from Caleb. Caleb stared out into the rain-streaked darkness of the highway. His face was pale, illuminated only by the harsh, unforgiving light of the dashboard instruments. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The CEO mask was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was a terrified man realizing he had made a fatal error in judgment. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against the cool glass of the steering wheel, and whispered a question that the high-fidelity microphone picked up with crystal clarity. It was a question directed at the universe, a belated realization of the magnitude of his mistake. "Who did I throw $20 at?" He closed his eyes. The windshield wipers swished back and forth. Swish-thump, swish-thump, like the ticking of a clock counting down the seconds of a life that was already over. The transition from the exposed, fluorescent misery of the number 42 bus to the hushed, impregnable sanctuary of Stonevale Ridge was jarring in its absolute silence. The private car that Darius had sent to the bus terminal did not smell of wet strangers or desperation. It smelled of heated leather and silence. We drove through the rain-slicked streets of the suburbs, climbing higher into the hills where the air was thinner and the gates were taller. When we finally turned into the long, winding driveway of the estate, the city lights of Rainford were just a distant, glittering smear below us. Irrelevant and far away, I did not go back to the house I shared with Caleb. That house, with its open floor plan and glass walls, was a stage set designed for his ego. This place, Stonevale Ridge, was a fortress designed for my protection. It belonged to the trust. It belonged to the history I had quietly maintained while Caleb was busy building a future on quicksand. The car stopped. The door was opened by a man with an umbrella before my foot could even touch the pavement. I stepped out, clutching my sleeping son, and walked up the stone steps. The heavy oak doors parted, and I stepped into a foyer that wrapped around me like a cashmere blanket. It was warm. The light was golden and diffused. Darius King was standing by the fireplace in the main hall. He looked exactly as he had 2 years ago, impeccable, imposing, and utterly devoid of unnecessary emotion. Beside him stood Marianne Holt, the most feared family law attorney in the state. She wore a cream-colored suit that cost more than Caleb's car, and her expression was one of professional readiness. "Welcome home, Mrs. Smith," Darius said. He did not use the name Rowe. It was a deliberate calibration of reality. "Thank you, Darius," I replied. My voice was steady. The shivering had stopped. "Is the room ready?" "The nursery is prepared," Marianne said. Stepping forward, her voice was soft but possessed a steel core. "The night nurse is vetted and waiting. Let us get the baby settled so we can work." I handed my son to the nurse. A woman with kind eyes and capable hands, watching him be carried up the grand staircase, I felt a physical weight lift from my chest, replaced immediately by a different kind of burden. The burden of execution. I was no longer just a mother protecting a child. I was a general stepping into the war room. I turned to Darius and Marianne. "I need 10 minutes to shower and change. Then we end this." 10 minutes later, I walked into the library. I had scrubbed the hospital smell and the bus grime from my skin. I was wearing a charcoal silk blouse and tailored trousers. I sat at the head of the mahogany table. Darius sat to my right. Marianne to my left. A stack of documents, 3 inches thick, sat in the center of the table. "Let us review the position," I said, opening the leather folio in front of me. To the world, and to Caleb. I was Peyton the wife, the former art history major who dabbled in charity work and handled the household scheduling. It was a convenient fiction. It was a mask that allowed Caleb to feel superior, to feel like the provider. The truth was written on the business cards tucked away in a safe deposit box that Caleb did not know existed. Peyton Smith, Senior Analyst, Crestline Risk and Compliance Bureau. I did not just understand finance. I specialized in forensic auditing and structural risk assessment. My entire career before Caleb, and my consultancy work during our marriage, was built on understanding how to dismantle complex financial structures. I knew how to find the cracks in a contract. I knew how to leverage a clause. And most importantly, I knew that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who knows where the money actually comes from. "The activation of the emergency clause in the Smith Family Trust is complete," Darius began, sliding a document toward me. "As of 1900 hours tonight, the trustees have voted to suspend all discretionary disbursements to the beneficiary, Caleb Rowe, citing a breach of the morality clause and a direct threat to the primary asset holder, you and the child." I picked up a fountain pen. The weight of it felt good in my hand. "And the credit lines?" "Severed," Darius said. "The American Express Centurion, the Visa Infinity, and the corporate expense accounts. They are all supplementary cards issued under the primary credit facility of the trust. We did not just cancel the cards. Peyton, we revoked the underwriting. His credit score just lost the entire history of those accounts. By tomorrow morning, he will be unrated." I looked at the document. I saw the list of assets, the SUV, the downtown loft office, the membership at the country club, the lease on the server farm for his tech company. "He thinks he owns these things," I said quietly. "He genuinely believes he paid for them." "He paid the monthly invoices," Marianne corrected gently, "using funds that you transferred into the joint account from the trust dividends. But the title, the liability, the ownership. It has always been the trust. It has always been you." This was the twist that was going to break him. Caleb Rowe was not a self-made man. He was a sponsored entity. When we met, he had big ideas and zero capital. I believed in him. I loved him. So I created the Smith Rowe Venture Fund. I put up the capital, $10 million of my own inheritance and earnings. I set it up so that he was the face and I was the silent partner. I let him sign the papers. I let him take the interviews. I let him believe that his genius was generating the wealth. I had built a sandbox for him to play king in. And tonight, I was taking away the sand. "We need to discuss the house," I said. "The lease at Orchard Key." "The lease is in the company name," Darius explained. "But the guarantor is the trust. We have withdrawn the guarantee. The landlord has a clause that allows for immediate eviction notice upon loss of financial backing. The notice was served electronically 30 minutes ago." "And the investors?" I asked. "They have been briefed," Darius said. "They were never really comfortable with his volatility. They stayed because they knew you were the compliance officer. Once I informed them that you were stepping down and activating the fraud protocols, they pulled the chute. The Series B funding is gone." I nodded. It was clean. It was surgical. There was no screaming, no throwing of vases, just the quiet, terrifying efficiency of contract law. "Peyton," Marianne said, shifting the conversation, "we need to talk about the boy. We need to talk about custody." I looked at her. "He threw us out of a car. Marianne, he left a 3-day-old infant in the rain." "I know," Marianne said, "and that is our spearhead. But we need to lock it down legally before he tries to spin a narrative. I have drafted an emergency ex parte motion for sole legal and physical custody." She slid a new document toward me. "The grounds are threefold," she continued, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. 1. Immediate physical child endangerment, supported by the hospital security footage and the witness statement from the nurse. 2. abandonment, and 3. And this is the one that will make the judge sign tonight: financial instability. Financial instability? I asked. By tomorrow morning, Caleb Rowe will be effectively insolvent. Marianne said. He has no home. He has no vehicle. He has no liquid cash. He has no credit. A judge will not grant custody to a man who cannot demonstrate the ability to provide a roof over the child's head. We are arguing that until he undergoes a full financial and psychological evaluation, he is a risk to the child's welfare. I looked at the words on the page. Sole custody. It felt aggressive. It felt final. I am not keeping him from his son forever, I said. I am not vindictive. If he cleans up, if he grows up, he can be a father, but he cannot be a father while he is a child himself. Agreed, Marianne said. This is a protective measure. It forces him to earn the right. He has to prove he is safe. And right now, a man who chooses a leather seat over his son's health is not safe. I signed the custody motion. The ink dried instantly, dark and permanent. There is one more thing, Darius said. He hesitated, which was rare for him. The media, the livestream Brielle posted, it is viral. Peyton, millions of views. The narrative is already spinning. People are calling him a monster. But there are spin doctors who will try to paint you as the villain who trapped him. Let them, I said, closing the folio. I do not fight on Instagram. I fight in court. I fight in the ledger. Let Brielle have her likes. I have the law. We can issue a statement, Darius suggested. A dignified release from the trust. No, I said. Silence is louder. Let him scream. Let him explain. The more he talks, the more he digs. We stay quiet. We stay at Stoneville. We let the system work exactly as I designed it to work. I stood up. The meeting was over. The machinery was in motion. Caleb was currently driving a car that was about to be repossessed, to a house he could no longer enter, to a job that no longer existed. He was a ghost. He just didn't know he was dead yet. Thank you, both of you, I said. I am going to check on my son. I walked out of the library and climbed the stairs to the nursery. The room was dim, lit only by a small nightlight shaped like a moon. The nurse was sitting in a rocking chair, reading a book. She looked up and smiled, then quietly excused herself to give me a moment. I walked over to the crib. My son was sleeping soundly, his chest rising and falling in a perfect, peaceful rhythm. He was so small, so new. He had no idea that his father had traded him for a clean car seat. He had no idea that his mother had just dismantled an empire to ensure his safety. I reached down and lightly touched his cheek. His skin was soft, warm, and alive. I remembered the $20 bill. I remembered the look on Caleb's face, the calculation, the dismissal. He had looked at us and seen a liability. He had seen a cost. I leaned down, resting my forehead against the wooden rail of the crib. You will never know that feeling, I whispered to him in the darkness. You will never stand in the rain waiting for someone to decide if you are worth saving. You will never have to beg for a ride. You will never have to wonder if you are loved. I straightened up. I felt a surge of power that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with resolve. I was not just a woman who had been wronged. I was the architect of my own rescue. I will build the world for you, I said, and I will make sure no one can ever take it away. I turned and walked to the window. Outside, the rain was still falling over Rainford, somewhere out there, in the dark and the wet. Caleb Rowe was realizing that the ATM card in his wallet was just a piece of plastic, and that the name on the door didn't mean he owned the house. He wanted me to be independent. He wanted me to learn the value of $1. I watched the headlights of a security patrol car sweep across the driveway. Lesson learned. Caleb, lesson learned. I did not need to be standing in the lobby of the Orchard Key residences to know exactly what the air conditioning tasted like. I had lived there for 3 years. It tasted of filtered ozone, expensive lilies, and the distinct, hushed pretension of a building where the rent for a one-bedroom apartment cost more than the average American family earned in 3 months. It was a place designed to make the people inside feel like they had ascended above the common problems of the world. Problems like rain, dirt, or consequences. But consequences have a way of climbing elevators. I pieced together the events of that night from the building's security logs, the incident report filed by the concierge, and the voicemail transcripts that my lawyer, Marianne, would later play for me with a grim sort of satisfaction. It was 11 o'clock at night when the black SUV, now carrying 3 people who were rapidly realizing they were trapped in a collapsing star, pulled up to the valet stand. The rain was still hammering down, unrelenting. Caleb Rowe stepped out of the car. He walked toward the glass doors with the frantic energy of a man trying to outrun an avalanche. He did not wait for Darlene or Brielle. He needed to get upstairs. He needed to get behind the double-locked door of our penthouse suite, pour himself a drink, and convince himself that the last 2 hours had been a hallucination. He walked up to the sensor panel next to the main entrance. He pulled his key fob from his pocket, a sleek, leather-encased piece of technology. He pressed it against the reader. Usually, the reader would emit a soft, pleasing chime, and the heavy glass doors would slide open. This time, the reader made a harsh, low buzz. A small red light flashed once. Access denied. Caleb stared at the light. He pressed the fob against the plastic again, harder this time, as if physical force could override digital code. Buzz. Red light. Inside the lobby, the night concierge was sitting at the marble desk. His name was Arthur. Arthur had worked there for 10 years. He was a man who knew every tenant's birthday, every mistress's name, and every dirty secret in the building. For 3 years, Arthur had bowed to Caleb. He had laughed at Caleb's jokes. He had accepted Caleb's holiday tips with a gracious nod. Tonight, Arthur did not bow. He did not rush to the door to override the lock. He stayed seated, watching Caleb through the rain-streaked glass with a neutral, unreadable expression. Caleb pounded on the glass. "Arthur, open the door. My key is demagnetized." Arthur stood up slowly. He walked to the door, but he did not open it. He cracked it just an inch, engaging the manual chain lock so that Caleb could not push his way in. "Mr. Rowe," Arthur said. His voice was not rude, but it was stripped of all the deference Caleb was used to. "I cannot let you up." "What are you talking about?" Caleb demanded, water dripping from his nose. Darlene and Brielle had come up behind him, huddling under a single umbrella, their faces pale. "I live here. Open the damn door." "You do not live here anymore, sir," Arthur said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He slid it through the crack in the door. "Mr. Henderson, the building manager, asked me to give you this. He also asked me to inform you that the police have been notified to remove any trespassers." Caleb ripped the envelope open. His wet fingers tore the paper. He pulled out a single sheet of official letterhead. It was a notice to vacate. "This says lease terminated," Caleb stammered, reading the document by the light of the lobby chandelier shining through the glass. "This says guarantor withdrawal. That is impossible. The rent is paid automatically." "The rent has not been paid in 90 days, sir," Arthur said. The truth hung in the wet air like smoke. "The payments were rejected for insufficient funds. Management allowed you to stay because the lease was guaranteed by the Smith Family Trust. We assumed it was a clerical error that Mrs. Smith would correct. But at 7 o'clock this evening, we received a legal notification from the trust formally withdrawing all backing and liability for the unit. 90 days. I had known about this. Of course, I had stopped the automatic transfers 3 months ago as a test. I wanted to see if Caleb would notice. I wanted to see if he ever looked at the accounts, if he ever checked a balance, if he ever paid attention to the mechanics of his own life. He had not. He had floated on, assuming the magic money fairy me would handle it. "But my things," Caleb whispered. "My clothes, my furniture." "Packed," Arthur said. Per the emergency clause in the rental agreement, once the guarantor withdraws and the arrears exceed $10,000, the unit is reclaimed immediately. Your personal effects have been removed to the service bay." "The service bay?" Darlene shrieked. "You put my fur coats in the basement like garbage." Arthur looked at Darlene. He did not apologize. "The service entrance is around the side. Ma'am, you have 1 hour to collect your items before we lock the bay for the night." The door clicked shut. Arthur turned his back and walked away. Caleb stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door of the life he used to have. Then, he turned and ran toward the side alley, past the dumpsters, to the service entrance. The room was a concrete box illuminated by a flickering fluorescent strip. It smelled of cleaning chemicals and wet cardboard, and there, piled in the center of the floor, was the sum total of Caleb Rowe's existence. It was not packed in the high-end, reinforced moving crates we had used when we moved in. It was packed in used liquor boxes and cheap, flimsy cardboard cartons that the building staff had likely scavenged from the recycling bin. His Italian suits were shoved into a box marked bleach. His collection of rare sneakers was jumbled together in a carton that was splitting at the seams. Darlene's vanity case was sitting on the concrete floor next to a mop bucket. It was a visual dismantling of his status. There is nothing that screams failure, quite like seeing your luxury goods stuffed into a banana box. "This is insane," Caleb said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. He pulled his phone out. "I am calling her. She has gone crazy. She cannot do this." He dialed my number. I was miles away at Stonevale Ridge, watching my son sleep, but my phone did not ring. I had already set up the diversion. Caleb held the phone to his ear, his face contorted with rage, ready to scream at me, ready to demand, ready to bully. "You have reached the legal offices of Marianne Holt," a crisp, recorded voice said. "We are currently representing Peyton Smith in all matters regarding marriage dissolution and asset recovery. If you are Caleb Rowe, please direct all future communication to our paralegal team during business hours. Any attempt to contact the client directly will be logged as a violation of the pending restraining order." Beep. Caleb lowered the phone slowly. He looked at it as if it had turned into a snake. "She got a lawyer," he said to the empty room. "She is not answering." "Well, what are we supposed to do?" Darlene screamed. "Kicking a box. Caleb, I have nowhere to go. My condo is rented out. You said we could stay here until the summer. Look at me. I am standing in a basement." "Mom, stop yelling," Brielle shouted. She was holding her phone up, the ring light blinding in the gloom. She was recording herself crying. "Guys, I am literally shaking. We are being evicted. My sister-in-law is a psycho. She literally locked us out. Does anyone know a good hotel that takes promos? I am so scared right now." She looked at the screen, waiting for the sympathy to roll in. "Put the phone away." "Brielle," Caleb snapped. "I need to post this," she retorted. "People need to know. Maybe someone will start a GoFundMe." "A GoFundMe?" Caleb laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "For us, Brielle, look at where we are. We are the villains in this movie. No one is going to send money to the girl with the Prada bag crying about being kicked out of a penthouse." He grabbed a box, his hands shaking. "We need to load the car. We need to go to a hotel. I will use the last of the cash I have to get a room, and we will figure this out in the morning." He dragged the box out into the rain. He heaved it toward the black SUV parked at the curb. He reached for the door handle. It was locked. He pressed the unlock button on his key fob. Nothing. He pressed it again. Nothing. He looked through the window. The dashboard of the SUV was glowing. A message was scrolling across the digital display in bright red letters. "Vehicle disabled. Remote immobilization active. Contact leasing provider. Repossession team dispatched." "No," Caleb whispered. "No. No. No." He tried the handle again, pulling so hard the plastic creaked. The car was a brick. It was dead. The leasing company, another entity backed by the trust, had remotely killed the ignition and locked the doors the moment the credit flag went up. "My purse is in there," Darlene yelled, banging on the window. "Caleb, my purse is on the seat. My ID." My pills. I cannot open it. Mother, Caleb shouted back, the rain plastering his hair to his skull. They killed the car. It is gone. So we are stranded, Brielle asked, her voice finally losing its performative edge and becoming genuinely small. In the rain with boxes. I need cash, Caleb said. He patted his pockets. I need cash for a cab. I need cash for a motel. He looked down the street. There was a bodega on the corner, its neon sign buzzing in the mist. Stay here. Watch the stuff. He ran down the block, his expensive dress shoes splashing through puddles. He burst into the bodega, gasping for air. He went straight to the ATM in the back corner. He shoved his debit card in. He punched in his PIN. Withdrawal $500. The machine whirred. It made the sound of counting money. For a second, Caleb's shoulders relaxed. Then, the screen flashed. Transaction denied. Contact financial institution. Card retained. The machine did not give the card back. It swallowed it. Caleb stared at the slot. He hit the cancel button. He hit the return button. Nothing. The machine had eaten his last lifeline. He turned around. The clerk behind the counter was watching him. Machine ate your card. Buddy? The clerk asked, chewing on a toothpick. Usually means the bank flagged it as stolen or dead. Caleb walked out of the store. He had $0. He had 0 cars. He had 0 homes. As he walked back toward the pile of wet cardboard boxes where his mother and sister were huddled, his phone rang again. He answered it without looking, desperate for it to be me, desperate for it to be a mistake, desperate for anyone to tell him this was a nightmare. Peyton, he gasped. Mr. Rowe, a male voice, slick, fast, and aggressive. Not a lawyer, not a banker. Who is this? Caleb asked. This is Vince from Apex Capital, the voice said. I am calling about the bridge loan you secured last week, the $50,000 note against the future equity of the Smith Trust. I cannot talk right now. Vince, Caleb said. Yeah, we need to talk. Caleb, Vince said, his tone dropping, because we just tried to verify the collateral with the trust, and they told us they have no record of the cosigner authorization. They sent us a copy of Peyton Smith's actual signature. Caleb stopped walking. The blood drained from his face, leaving him gray. And here is the thing. Caleb, Vince continued, the signature you gave us on the loan document, it does not match, not even close. Now, in my business, we call that fraud, and usually, we just break legs. But since this involves a federal trust, this is a felony. I am giving you 24 hours to wire the full $50,000 back, or I hand this over to the district attorney, and trust me, you do not want to go to prison for forgery. The call ended. Caleb stood on the sidewalk. The rain was torrential now. It soaked through his suit, through his shirt, chilling him to the marrow. He looked at the apartment building he was barred from. He looked at the luxury car he couldn't drive. He looked at the boxes of cheap junk that represented his life. For 5 years, he had performed the role of the successful man. He had played the part perfectly, but he had forgotten that he was performing on a stage I had built, using props I had paid for. Now, the lights were off. The curtain was down. The audience had gone home. He looked at Darlene, who was weeping into a wet fur coat. He looked at Brielle, who was staring blankly at her phone screen. Who did I marry? He whispered to the rain, but he was asking the wrong question. The question wasn't who he had married. The question was, who did I think I was fooling? He sat down on a box marked miscellaneous. The cardboard was wet and sagging. It buckled under his weight. But he didn't move. He just sat there, in the dark, under the service entrance overhang, and waited for the police to come and tell him he couldn't even sit there. The conference room at Holt & Associates was a study in aggressive neutrality. The walls were a dove gray. The table was a slab of polished granite that looked cold enough to conduct an autopsy on. And the air conditioning was set to a temperature that kept everyone alert and slightly uncomfortable. It was 10 o'clock the following morning. While Caleb was presumably waking up in a cheap motel room with a stiff neck and a deactivated phone, we were assembling the weapon that would end him. Marianne Holt stood before a whiteboard, a black marker in her hand. She did not look like a woman who offered comfort. She looked like a surgeon preparing to amputate a gangrenous limb. "We are building a timeline of intent," Marianne said, uncapping the marker. "In family court," he said. "She said is a coin toss, but a timeline. A timeline is a cage. If we build it strong enough, he cannot climb out." She wrote the date on the board in sharp, angular block letters. January 14th, 1700 hours. "Discharge recorded," Marianne narrated, slashing a line across the board. "Medical notes confirm you were cleared for wheelchair exit only. You were 3 days post-major abdominal surgery. Pain management protocol was still active. Oxycodone prescription filled, but not taken because you were breastfeeding. You were physically vulnerable." "Agreed," I said. Seated at the head of the table, I had my laptop open, running a secure link to the Crestline servers. But my eyes were on the board. 1715 hours. "Pickup zone," Marianne continued. "We have the incident report from the head of hospital security. But we have something better," she gestured to her paralegal. "A young man named Trent, who moved with silent efficiency." Trent tapped a key on the wall-mounted monitor. A grainy black-and-white video feed flickered to life. It was the CCTV footage from the Rainford General Hospital entrance. I watched myself on the screen. I looked small, hunched over the bundle in my arms. I saw the black SUV pull up. I saw the window roll down. I saw the conversation. Though there was no audio, and then I saw the moment that would define the rest of our lives. On the screen, Caleb's hand extended from the window. The motion was dismissive, a flick of the wrist. A small, pale object fluttered from his fingers and landed in the puddle. The car did not wait. The brake lights flared, and the vehicle accelerated, merging recklessly into the lane. "That," Marianne said, pointing the marker at the frozen image of the SUV driving away, "is the kill shot. That is not a marital dispute. That is abandonment. In the state of Washington, leaving a dependent spouse and a newborn in a hazardous environment and a rainstorm with an open wound constitutes hazardous is grounds for immediate emergency protection." "It looks worse on video," I whispered. "It looks cruel." "It is cruel," Marianne corrected. "But legally, it is objective evidence of a lack of paternal instinct and a disregard for safety. But we need to link the object." I reached into my bag and pulled out the Ziploc bag containing the $20 bill. I slid it across the granite table. "Exhibit A," Marianne picked it up, examining the stained, wrinkled currency through the plastic. "Trent, log this into the evidence chain. We also have the corroborating witness." "Witness?" I asked. "It was just us." "You did not see her," Marianne said. "But she saw you. Nurse Nora Klein? She was on her break, smoking a cigarette in the designated shelter about 30 feet away. She saw the car pull up. She saw the interaction. She saw the bill thrown." Trent pulled up a photo on the screen. It was a smartphone picture, taken from a distance. Slightly blurry, but unmistakable. It showed me bending down, clutching my stomach, retrieving the money from the wet pavement. Nurse Klein attached this to an internal incident report she filed with the hospital social worker immediately after you left, Marianne explained. She wrote that she was concerned about, quote, "a potential domestic abuse situation involving financial control and physical neglect. She took the photo to protect herself if anything happened to you." I felt a lump form in my throat. A stranger. A nurse I didn't even know had watched out for me when my own husband hadn't. "We are attaching her affidavit to the motion," Marianne said. "We are filing for an ex parte temporary custody order. We are asking for sole legal and physical custody of the infant, with Caleb's visitation suspended pending a full psychological evaluation and a court-ordered parenting class. We are also asking for a restraining order based on financial harassment and the fraudulent loans." "Do it," I said. The door to the conference room opened, and Darius walked in. He did not look happy. He looked like a hunter who had found something rotting in a trap. He was holding a thick stack of printed spreadsheets. "We have a problem," Darius said, placing the stack in front of me. Or rather, Caleb has a much bigger problem than we thought. I ran the forensic trace on the accounts linked to the fake watch purchase and the business expenses he has been claiming. "What did you find?" I asked, putting on my glasses. The analyst part of my brain took over, pushing the emotional mother aside. "Circular trading," Darius said. "He set up a shell company in Delaware called Apex Solutions. He has been invoicing his own main company for consulting services that never happened. He takes the money from the trust-backed operating account, pays Apex, and then Apex pays for his lifestyle. The lease on the SUV, paid by Apex. The dinners, Apex. That is embezzlement," I said, scanning the rows of numbers. "He is stealing from the company to hide his personal burn rate." "It gets worse," Darius said. "He was round-tripping the money back into the main company at the end of the quarter to inflate the revenue figures. He was making the company look profitable to keep the investors and you happy, using the same money over and over again. It is a classic Ponzi scheme structure, just on a micro level. If the IRS audit goes deep enough, he is looking at 5 to 10 years for wire fraud." I sat back in my chair. Caleb wasn't just incompetent, he was criminal. He had built a house of cards inside a house of mirrors. "And then there is this," Darius said, sliding a single sheet of paper from the bottom of the stack. I did a keyword search on his archived emails. I found this in his sent folder from 6 months ago. It is to his fraternity brother, the one who works in venture capital in San Francisco. I picked up the paper. The email was short. Subject: the wife problem. From Caleb, Roe, to Brad. "Don't worry about Peyton meddling in the Series B round. I have it handled. I have convinced her that her anxiety is too high for business. I have got her locked into the domestic role now. She is pregnant, tired, and pliant. I have put the golden handcuffs on her. She handles the compliance grunt work, but I make the decisions. She is not going to leave. She does not have the guts to be a single mother. I have capped her ambition. She is just a housewife now. I read the email twice. Capped her ambition. Pliant. Just a housewife. This was not just fraud. This was malice. This was a calculated campaign to psychologically dismantle me so that he could use my skills without dealing with my opinions. He didn't just want my money. He wanted my submission." "This is the motive," Marianne said softly, reading over my shoulder. "This proves that the financial abuse was premeditated. He orchestrated your dependency. This destroys any claim he might make that you are the unstable one." "Keep this," I said, my voice ice cold. "Do not leak it. Do not post it. We save this for the judge. If he tries to speak in court, we read this into the record." "We filed the motion an hour ago," Marianne said. "His lawyer just responded. He hired Saul Goodman's discount cousin, a guy named Leonard Blanton. He works out of a strip mall near the airport." "What is their defense?" "Blanton filed a countermotion," Marianne said, checking her tablet. "They are claiming that you are suffering from acute postpartum psychosis. They claim you are hysterical, that you voluntarily left the car in a fit of hormonal rage, and that Caleb threw the money because you demanded it. They are asking for emergency custody to be awarded to Caleb and his mother, Darlene, citing that you are a danger to the child." "Predictable," I said. "The crazy woman defense. It is a standard play for a man with no cards," Marianne agreed. "But we are going to crush it." She pulled up another file. "I have your discharge summary from the hospital. It includes a psychiatric evaluation conducted by the attending OB/GYN before release. Standard protocol. Patient is alert, oriented, and emotionally stable, bonding well with infant, no signs of PPD. And just to be sure, I have booked you an independent evaluation with Dr. Aris this afternoon. By the time Blanton stands up in court, we will have 2 board-certified doctors certifying your sanity against the word of a man who buys fake watches." "When is the hearing?" Tomorrow morning, 900 hours. Judge Sterling. He hates time wasters. I looked at the pile of evidence, the wrinkled $20 bill, the photo of me in the rain, the forensic spreadsheets showing the theft, the email proving the betrayal. It was a mountain of proof, but it was also a mausoleum of my marriage. Every document was a brick in the tomb of the man I thought I loved. I need to sign the petition, I said. Marianne slid the thick document toward me. Peyton Smith versus Caleb Rowe. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My hand hovered over the signature line. For a second, I hesitated. Not because I wanted him back, but because signing this meant admitting that the last 5 years had been a lie. It meant admitting that I had been fooled. But then I thought of the email. She does not have the guts. I thought of the bus ride. I thought of the rain. I gripped the pen. I did not shake. I did not cry. I signed my name in a clear, bold script. Peyton Smith. I put the pen down. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. File it, I said, and serve him. Serve him wherever he is. Make sure Darlene sees it. It is done, Marianne said. I stood up and walked to the window of the conference room. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a bruised purple. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I looked different. The softness around my eyes was gone. The eagerness to please was gone. I was no longer a woman asking to be loved. I was a woman dictating the laws of engagement. Darius, I said, not turning around. Make sure the trust cuts the funding for his legal defense. 2. The standard retainer clause usually excludes criminal defense and divorce proceedings against the primary trustee. Verify that. Already done, Darius replied. Mr. Blanton is going to ask for a retainer check by Friday. It is going to bounce. Good, I said. Let him feel the weight of the world he wanted to own. I walked back to the table and picked up the Ziploc bag with the $20. I looked at it one last time. Keep this safe, I told Trent. I want it framed when this is all over. I want to hang it in my office. As a trophy? Trent asked. No, I said. As a reminder, the price of freedom was exactly $20. I gathered my things. I am going to feed my son. You have your orders. I walked out of the room, leaving the lawyers to sharpen their knives. The war was fully joined now, but for the first time in days. I didn't feel like I was fighting for survival. I felt like I was fighting for justice, and justice, unlike Caleb Rowe, always pays its debts. The silence at Stonevale Ridge was deceptive. It felt peaceful, with the rain tapping against the library windows and the fire crackling in the hearth. But in the digital world, a war was raging. It was a war fought with pixels, hashtags, and anonymous accounts. And until that morning, I had not realized that the enemy general was my own sister-in-law. I sat at the mahogany table, my son sleeping in the bassinet next to me. Darius stood by the large monitor he had set up, his face illuminated by the blue glow of a network analysis graph. We knew Brielle was shallow, Darius said, his voice low and devoid of judgment. We did not know she was organized. He tapped a key. The screen shifted to display a constellation of social media profiles. There were dozens of them, accounts with generic names, accounts posing as concerned neighbors, accounts claiming to be former colleagues. These are not random trolls, Darius explained, tracing a line connecting the nodes. These are bot farms and sock puppet accounts. And the IP address administering them traces back to a laptop registered to Brielle Rowe. I leaned in, reading the posts. I heard she trapped him with the baby. She has a history of mental instability. Caleb is a saint for dealing with her mood swings. She has been seeding these narratives for months, I said. A cold realization settling in my stomach. This wasn't just teenage angst. This was an insurance policy. She was building a library of smears to use in case I ever stepped out of line. And she was paid for it, Darius added. He pulled up a spreadsheet. Look at the ledger for Caleb's company. There is a recurring monthly payment of $2,000 to a vendor listed as Digital Arch. That is Brielle's LLC. He was paying his sister a salary to cyberstalk his wife. I felt a wave of nausea, not from fear, but from the sheer, petty nastiness of it. They had turned our family life into a covert operation. "Shut it down," I said. "Send a cease and desist to the platform hosts, and flag the IP for harassment." "Already done," Darius said, "but we have a new player on the board." He nodded to the intercom on the desk. "Security at the main gate just radioed up. There is a woman asking to see you. She says her name is Sloane Barrett. She claims to be Caleb's brand consultant." Sloane Barrett. The name was familiar. I had seen it on invoices for marketing strategy, usually for exorbitant amounts. "Let her in," I said. "If Caleb sent a diplomat, he is more desperate than I thought." 20 minutes later, Sloane Barrett walked into the library. She was a striking woman, sharp-edged and polished, wearing a suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. She looked like the kind of woman who drank espresso for dinner and regarded empathy as a market inefficiency. She did not look at the baby. She looked at me, assessing me as a threat level. "Mrs. Smith?" she said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. She did not sit down. "I am here on behalf of Caleb Rowe to facilitate a quiet resolution to this misunderstanding. It is not a misunderstanding. Ms. Barrett," I replied, keeping my hands folded on the table. "It is a legal dismantling, and you are not a lawyer. Why are you here?" "I manage Caleb's image," she said. "And right now, his image is taking a hit that affects his investors. We are willing to offer a settlement. Caleb will agree to a temporary separation, and he will pay a generous monthly stipend, provided you issue a joint statement retracting the abandonment narrative and unfreeze the operating accounts." "A stipend," I almost laughed. "Ms. Barrett, I own the accounts. I do not need an allowance from my own money." Sloane shifted her weight. For a split second, the professional mask slipped. "Look, Peyton, can I call you Peyton? You are hurt. I get it. Postpartum hormones are a mess, but destroying Caleb destroys the company. And frankly, you do not want your dirty laundry aired. We know about your episodes." "My episodes?" I asked, my voice dropping. "You mean the fiction Brielle wrote?" "I mean what we can prove," Sloane said, her tone hardening. "I have been with Caleb for 2 years. Peyton, I know where the bodies are buried. I know what he really thinks of you. He kept you around for the bookkeeping. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. Just sign the deal, take the money, and go be a mom." I stared at her. I have been with Caleb for 2 years. She hadn't meant to say it. It was a slip, born of arrogance. She wasn't just his consultant. She was the one he went to when he was working late. She was the one who validated his ego while I was validating his parking. "You are sleeping with him," I stated. It wasn't a question. Sloane's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "My personal life is irrelevant. I am here to save the asset." "You are the asset," I said, standing up. "You are the marketing strategy he was spending $5,000 a month on. You are the reason he needed the black card to work at the steakhouse." I walked over to the desk and picked up a file. "Ms. Barrett, you came here thinking you were negotiating with a scorned wife. You thought I would be crying. You thought I would be jealous. But you forgot one thing. I am a compliance officer. I do not care who he sleeps with. I care who he steals from." I opened the file. "Darius found the bridge loan from Apex Capital," I said. $50,000, secured last week. The collateral was my trust fund. The cosigner was me." I turned the document around so she could see it. "That is my name," I said, pointing to the signature at the bottom. "But that is not my handwriting. That is a digital trace of a signature I used on a Christmas card 3 years ago. Caleb copy-pasted it. And since you are the brand consultant who manages his documents, I am guessing you helped him format the PDF." Sloane went pale. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the terrified realization that she had walked into a trap. "That I did not know about that," she stammered. "I just handle the PR." Forgery of a financial instrument involving a federally regulated trust is a Class B felony, I said. If you were involved, Ms. Barrett, you are looking at 5 years, minimum. I didn't sign it, she shouted, her voice shrill. He told me he had your permission. He said you were on board, but too tired to come to the office. So you admit you knew about the loan? I asked. She froze. She had just confessed. Get out of my house, I said quietly, and tell Caleb that his diplomat just gave me the final piece of evidence I needed for the criminal referral. Sloane Barrett turned and fled. She didn't walk. She ran. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind her, sealing out the scent of her expensive perfume and her cheap desperation. I sat back down. My heart was pounding, not from heartbreak, but from adrenaline. She confirmed it, Darius said from the corner. She panicked and confirmed he signed it. Send the file, I said. Send it to the State Bureau of Financial Investigation. We are not just suing for divorce anymore. We are reporting a crime. The phone on the desk buzzed. It was a text message, a burner number. Peyton, please. It is Cal. I am at a payphone. My cards are gone. The car is gone. I am sorry. I messed up. But think of the baby. He needs his father. You cannot keep a son from his dad. I love him. I love you. Let's talk. Just us. I looked at the words. He needs his father. It was the last arrow in his quiver. The emotional guilt trip. The appeal to the nuclear family ideal that he knew I had always wanted. I picked up the phone and typed a reply. I did not send it to the burner. I sent it to Marianne, to be logged in the legal correspondence. Fatherhood is not a biological right. It is a fiduciary duty. You defaulted on the deposit when you left him in the rain. You do not get to claim the equity now. I put the phone down. We have one more loose end, Darius said. The family support ledger item. I dug deeper into the metadata. He spun the monitor around. It wasn't just Brielle, he said. Look at this. He was paying Darlene's mortgage directly from the company operating fund, listed as office rent, satellite location, and he was paying Brielle's car payments listed as vehicle leasing fleet. He was expensing his entire family's existence to the investors. So, when the investors pulled out, I started, the dominoes hit them too. Darius finished. Brielle just lost her car. Darlene just lost her condo. The repo orders went out this morning. I imagined the scene at the cheap motel where they were hiding. The realization that the gravy train hadn't just stopped. It had derailed and exploded. Turn on the audio surveillance from the apartment, I said. The one in the nursery. They might have gone back there to try and get their things. We hadn't cut the feed to the nursery camera in the penthouse yet. The apartment was locked, but if they tried to break in, Darius accessed the feed. The screen showed the dark, empty nursery of the Orchard Key penthouse, but we could hear voices in the hallway outside the door. They were shouting. You said you handled it. That was Darlene's voice. You said the brand work was paying for the lease. Now I have an eviction notice on my condo door. I did what Caleb told me to do, Brielle screamed back. He said if I posted the bad stuff about Peyton, he would cover the Rover payments I earned that money I worked for it. You trolled your brother's wife for a car, Darlene shrieked. You stupid girl. You gave her the ammunition. Do you know what happens if they find those accounts? We are accessories. You took the mortgage money, Brielle yelled. You knew it was coming from the company. You knew Peyton didn't know. Shut up, Caleb's voice roared, sounding ragged and exhausted. Both of you, shut up. The police are coming. The doorman called them. We have to go. I am not going anywhere with you, Brielle cried. You are toxic. You ruined my brand. I am calling an Uber. I am going to stay with my friends. You have no money for an Uber. Caleb laughed. A manic, broken sound. We are in this together. Brielle, we are the Rowe family. Remember, we stick together. I hate you, Brielle screamed. Then, the sound of running footsteps, a door slamming, and then, silence. They were eating each other alive, the facade of the perfect, wealthy family had dissolved the moment the check cleared. revealing the greed and the resentment rotting underneath. "They are finished," Darius said, closing the feed. "Not yet," I said. "They are broke, they are angry, but they are not yet accountable." A chime from the laptop signaled a new email. It was from the lead investigator at the Bureau, Mrs. Smith. "We have reviewed the digital signature analysis and the affidavit regarding the Apex loan. Based on the evidence provided and the corroborating admission from the associate Ms. Barrett, we have sufficient grounds. A subpoena ducis tecum is being issued for Caleb Rowe's financial records. A warrant for questioning regarding fraud and forgery is being drafted. We will serve him within the hour." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. This was it. A subpoena. It wasn't a divorce paper. It wasn't a civil suit. It was the heavy hand of the state. It was the point of no return. Caleb thought he was fighting a bad breakup. He thought he could charm or bully his way out of it. He thought he could throw a $20 bill at the problem and make it go away. He was about to find out that the law doesn't take IOUs. "Darius," I said, "print the subpoena, and print the photo of the $20. I want them in the file for the custody hearing tomorrow." "You want the judge to see the contrast?" "I want the judge to see the exchange rate," I said. "He traded his family for $20. I am trading him for justice. I think I got the better deal." I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had finally stopped. The clouds were breaking over the mountains. The storm was passing, at least for me, for Caleb Rowe. The storm was just making landfall. I picked up my son, who was beginning to stir. "It is okay," I whispered to him. "The monsters are not under the bed. They are in the spreadsheets, and Mommy knows how to delete them." We were safe, the fortress held, and tomorrow, the king would officially lose his crown. The ballroom of the Rainford Grand Hotel smelled of expensive lilies and old money. It was the annual New Beginnings Gala, a fundraising event for postpartum maternal health that the Smith Family Trust had quietly underwritten for a decade. In previous years, I had attended as Caleb's +1, standing in his shadow while he shook hands and took credit for the checks I had signed. Tonight, I stood at the podium alone. My physical recovery was still a raw, throbbing reality. Underneath my tailored navy gown, my C-section incision felt like a zipper of fire every time I shifted my weight. My breasts were heavy and aching, a biological clock ticking louder than the Rolex on the wrist of the donor in the front row. I wanted to be home. I wanted to be in the dim nursery at Stonevale Ridge, smelling the milk and soap scent of my son. But Marianne Holt had been clear if I wanted to win the war. I had to win the narrative, and the narrative required a face. "Caleb will come," Marianne had predicted earlier that afternoon, smoothing the lapel of her blazer. "He is drowning. He knows this gala is the most public event on the social calendar. He thinks if he can corner you in front of the cameras, if he can stage a reconciliation, you will be too polite to reject him. He is counting on your training as a good wife to save him." "He is wrong," I had replied. "I know," Marianne said, a shark-like smile touching her lips. "That is why we are letting him in. We are not blocking him at the door. We are letting him walk onto the stage so he can fall through the trap door." I looked out at the sea of faces, donors, doctors, the press. They were whispering. They had seen the live stream. They had heard the rumors of the eviction. They were looking for the cracks in my armor. "Thank you all for coming," I said into the microphone. My voice was steady, magnified by the speakers. "We talk a lot about the joy of birth. We rarely talk about the vulnerability of the mother. Tonight, we change that conversation." As I spoke, I saw movement near the side entrance. The heavy velvet curtains parted. Caleb Rowe entered the room. He was wearing a tuxedo that I recognized immediately. It was the one he had bought for our wedding. It was slightly tight across the shoulders now, or perhaps he was just carrying the weight of his own collapse. He looked tired. His skin was gray under the ballroom lights, and his eyes were darting around the room with a frantic, predatory energy. He was not alone. Darlene was with him, draped in a fur stole that I knew for a fact was currently listed on a repossession order. They were trying to project power. They looked like ghosts crashing a funeral. Caleb caught my eye. A smile plastered itself onto his face, a terrifying, desperate grimace of charm. He started moving toward the stage, pushing past a waiter. He was holding a piece of paper in his hand, a script. He had written a speech. He was going to try to hijack my event to apologize. But before he could reach the stairs, a figure stepped out from the shadows of the VIP section. It was Sloane Barrett. Caleb stopped. He looked confused. He clearly thought Sloane was there to help him, perhaps to manage the press. He took a step toward her. Sloane did not look at him. She walked straight to the edge of the stage where I was standing. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She placed it on the podium, right next to my water glass. "It is all there," Sloane said, her voice low enough that only the front row could hear. But the microphones picked up the hum of her betrayal. The invoices for the bot farms, the text messages from Caleb instructing Brielle on which lies to post, the receipts for the fake watch, and the original PDF file of the loan application with your forged signature. "I am out. Peyton, I want the immunity deal." Caleb froze. The color drained from his face so completely he looked like a wax figure. He watched his mistress hand over the nails for his coffin. "Thank you, Ms. Barrett," I said, my voice cold. "Your cooperation is noted." I looked up at Caleb. He was standing 10 feet away, trapped in the open aisle, hundreds of eyes fixed on him. The script in his hand trembled. He realized, in that second, that he was not walking into a reconciliation. He was walking into an ambush. "Peyton," he croaked. He tried to step forward, to play the role of the grieving husband. "Peyton, honey, please, we need to talk. The baby." "The baby is safe," I said, cutting him off. I did not yell. I did not cry. I spoke with the quiet, crushing authority of the person who pays the bills. "And he is private. This event is about protecting mothers. Caleb, not providing photo opportunities for fathers who leave newborns in the rain." A ripple of gasps went through the room. The reference to the rain incident confirmed the rumors. That was when Darlene snapped. The humiliation of being ignored, of being broke, of seeing her son emasculated, was too much for her fragile ego. She lunged past Caleb, her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little witch!" Darlene shrieked. Her voice shattered the polite atmosphere of the gala. "He made you. You were nothing before the Rowe name. You stole my grandson. You locked us out of our home." She grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray and threw it. The glass shattered against the base of the podium, spraying sparkling wine across the hem of my gown. "He is my blood," Darlene screamed, her eyes wild. "I have rights. You cannot hide him from us." The room went deadly silent. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked at Darlene with a mixture of pity and revulsion. "Security," I said calmly. 2 large men in dark suits materialized from the wings. They did not handle Darlene roughly, but they handled her firmly. They took her by the arms. "Get your hands off me," Darlene yelled, kicking out. "Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are, Mrs. Rowe," one of the guards said. "You are trespassing," as they dragged her toward the exit. Caleb stood paralyzed. He looked from his screaming mother to me. He looked at the audience, the investors, the peers, the people whose validation he craved more than oxygen. They were looking at him with disgust. The mask had not just slipped. It had been ripped off, revealing the ugly, chaotic entitlement underneath. "Go, Caleb," I said into the microphone. "Your lawyer is waiting for you." He turned and fled. He followed the path of his mother's ejection. Head down, shoulders hunched, a man eviscerated by his own hubris. I turned back to the crowd. I took a breath. My incision throbbed. A sharp reminder of the physical price I had paid to bring life into this world, a price Caleb had treated as an inconvenience. "I apologize for the disruption," I said. As I was saying, Financial independence is the first line of defense for a mother, and tonight, we are going to make sure more women have that shield. The applause that followed was not polite. It was thunderous. It was the sound of a room choosing a side. But the night was not over. The gala was just the opening act. The real theater was scheduled for 45 minutes later. I left the stage and went straight to the green room. Marianne was there, holding her phone. "Judge Sterling granted the emergency hearing," she said. "He saw the footage of Darlene throwing the glass. He said, and I quote, 'If they cannot control themselves at a black tie gala, they certainly cannot control themselves around an infant. We are up in 30 minutes. Night court session. Is Caleb coming?" "He has no choice," Marianne said. "We served him with the subpoena in the parking lot as he was running away. If he does not show, he is in contempt and goes straight to jail." We took the back exit. The drive to the courthouse was a blur of city lights and rain. My adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. I closed my eyes and pictured my son. I was doing this for him. Every signature, every confrontation, every cold calculation was a brick in the wall around his future. The courthouse at night was a desolate place, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. We walked into courtroom 4. Caleb was already there. He was sitting at the defendant's table with his lawyer, Leonard Blanton. Blanton looked like he had been dragged out of bed. His tie was crooked, and he was shuffling papers nervously. Caleb looked worse. He had loosened his bow tie. His hair was disheveled. He was staring at the table, his hands clasping and unclasping. He looked up when I entered. For a second, I saw a flash of the old Caleb, the charm, the arrogance. He opened his mouth to say something, maybe a plea, maybe a threat, but then his phone buzzed. He shouldn't have had his phone out in court, but the judge hadn't entered yet. Caleb looked at the screen, a look of confusion, and then sudden, desperate hope crossed his face. He answered it, shielding his mouth with his hand. "Hello," he whispered. I watched him from the plaintiff's table. I saw his posture straighten. I saw the light come back into his eyes. "Yes," Caleb whispered into the phone. "Yes, I understand. You can fix it, really. The trust bylaws." Okay. I will hold. I will stay calm." He hung up. He looked at me across the aisle, and for the first time in 24 hours, he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has found a loophole. He leaned over to his lawyer and whispered something. Blanton looked surprised but nodded. "What just happened?" I whispered to Marianne. "Someone called him," Marianne said, frowning. "Someone just gave him a lifeline, or at least, they made him think they did." "Who?" "There is no one left," Marianne said. "We froze everyone, unless—" She tapped her pen on the table, thinking. "Unless it is the bait," she murmured. "What bait?" "Darius," she said. "Darius told me he might run a psychological operation. If Caleb walks into this hearing thinking he is beaten, he might plead for mercy. He might play the victim. But if he walks in thinking he has a secret weapon, if he walks in thinking he is about to win, he will overplay his hand. He will be arrogant, and Judge Sterling hates arrogance." So the call was fake. "The call was real," Marianne said. "The hope is fake." The door to the judge's chambers opened. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Sterling walked in. He was a man with a face like a carved cliffside. He sat down and looked at the papers in front of him. He looked at the photo of the $20 bill. He looked at the transcript of Darlene screaming at the gala. Then he looked at Caleb. "Mr. Rowe," Judge Sterling said, "we are here to discuss the immediate safety of a minor child. I have reviewed the plaintiff's evidence. It is extensive." Caleb stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at me with that new, artificial confidence the phone call had given him. "Your Honor," Caleb said, his voice smooth. "With all due respect, this evidence is out of context, and furthermore, I have just received information regarding the legality of the trust's actions. My wife is acting under emotional duress, and I believe we can prove that her financial maneuvers are invalid." "Is that so?" Judge Sterling asked. He did not look impressed. He looked bored. Yes, Your Honor, Caleb said, puffing out his chest. I am a loving father. My family is simply passionate. We want our son back, and I believe the court will find that I am the stable parent here. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand swept past the 12. It was exactly 2 hours since the start of the hearing timeline. It was exactly 2 hours since the moment in the restaurant when his world had started to crack. The 2 hours later, from the very beginning of my story, had arrived. Caleb's phone, which sat on the table in front of him, lit up again. It was a text message, the follow-up to the call he had just received. He glanced down at it, expecting the loophole details, expecting the salvation the voice on the phone had promised. I watched his face. I watched the exact moment the human soul leaves the body. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened. But no sound came out. The smugness vanished, replaced by a horror so absolute it was almost physical. He dropped the phone. It clattered onto the floor, the screen facing up. He didn't scream. He just stood there, staring at nothing, as if someone had just reached into his chest and pulled out his heart. He turned to his mother and sister, who were sitting in the back row. He looked at them as if he had never seen them before. Mr. Rowe, Judge Sterling asked, "Are you unwell?" Caleb didn't answer. He couldn't answer, because he had just read the message. He had just heard the truth that the voice on the phone had promised to deliver. And it wasn't a loophole. It was an autopsy report of his entire life. I sat back in my chair. The trap had snapped shut. The noose was tight, and it was time for the final reveal. The courtroom was silent, save for the hum of the ventilation system and the frantic, shallow breathing of the man standing at the defendant's table. Caleb's phone lay on the floor where he had dropped it, the screen glowing up at the ceiling like an accusatory eye. Judge Sterling leaned forward, his black robes rustling. Mr. Rowe, do you require medical assistance, or can we proceed with the dismantling of your defense? Caleb looked up. The artificial confidence he had worn moments ago, bolstered by the mysterious phone call he thought was a lifeline, had evaporated. In its place was the hollow, haunted look of a man who had just read his own obituary. He had not heard a savior on the phone. He had not found a loophole. The secret contact he thought was helping him was actually the chief auditor of the Smith Family Trust, a man named Marcus who answered to only one person. The call, and the subsequent text message Caleb had just read, was the final piece of the trap Marianne and I had set. "Read it," Marianne said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. She pointed to the phone on the floor. "Read the notification you just received. Mr. Rowe, tell the court why your accounts were actually frozen. Tell them it was not a bank error." Caleb shook his head, backing away from the table. "No," he whispered. "It is not possible. You cannot do that." "If you will not read it, I will," Marianne said. She picked up a document from her desk. At 5:17 on the afternoon of January 14th, 2 hours after you threw a $20 bill into a puddle, the Trust's automated risk algorithm received an input. It was the incident report filed by Rainford General Hospital regarding spousal abandonment post-surgery. That report, combined with the video evidence of you leaving your wife without transport, triggered Clause 74 of the Smith Rowe Venture Trust Agreement. The courtroom went still. Clause 74. "The distress and abandonment protocol," Marianne clarified. Turning to the judge, "Mrs. Smith drafted this clause 5 years ago when she established the fund. It states that if the primary beneficiary, Mr. Rowe, demonstrates gross negligence or malicious endangerment toward the grantor, Mrs. Smith, during a medical crisis, his status as a beneficiary is immediately and permanently revoked. The freeze was not a decision Peyton made yesterday out of spite. It was a legal trap you set for yourself the moment you decided your leather seats were more important than your wife's recovery." Caleb stared at me. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. He finally understood. I hadn't pushed a button to destroy him. He had pushed it himself. The $20 bill was not just an insult, it was the activation key. By treating me like a beggar, he had legally proven he was unfit to be a king. He threw away a $10 million endowment, Marianne said, dropping the document onto the table with a heavy thud. To save $20 on a cab fare, that is the character of the man asking for custody. Caleb slumped into his chair. His lawyer, Mr. Blanton, looked at the document and closed his eyes, realizing he was defending a corpse. But we are not done, Marianne continued. She gestured to the back of the room. The court calls Sloane Barrett to the stand. Caleb's head whipped around. He watched as Sloane walked up the aisle. She did not look at him. She looked straight ahead, her face pale but set in a line of grim determination. She took the oath. She sat down. Ms. Barrett, Marianne asked, what was your official role in Mr. Rowe's life? I was his brand consultant, Sloane said, her voice shaking slightly. And his mistress? Darlene gasped in the back row. Brielle put her head in her hands. And during the course of your relationship, Marianne asked, did Mr. Rowe ever discuss his financial strategy regarding his wife? Yes, Sloane said. Frequently. What did he say? Sloane took a breath. She looked directly at Caleb, who was shrinking into his suit. He said that Peyton was too smart for her own good, Sloane said clearly. He said he had to keep her pregnant, tired, and doubting herself. He told me, if I keep her low, she will never realize she is the one holding the ladder. He said he needed to make her feel small so she wouldn't dare to leave him. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a second. Keep her low, Judge Sterling repeated. The judge looked at Caleb with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. You viewed your wife not as a partner, but as an asset to be suppressed. It was just talk, Caleb cried out, standing up. It was locker room talk. I love her, I built a life for her. Sit down. Mr. Rowe, the bailiff shouted. And the loan, Marianne asked Sloane. The $50,000 bridge loan from Apex Capital. He forged her signature, Sloane said. I saw him do it. He used a stylus on his iPad. He laughed while he did it. He said, Peyton signs whatever I tell her to anyway. This just saves time. Marianne turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have submitted the forensic handwriting analysis confirming the forgery. We are moving that the court refer this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. This is not just a divorce. This is grand larceny and identity theft. Judge Sterling nodded. He picked up his gavel. He did not need to deliberate. He did not need a recess. The facts were a monolith. The court finds the defendant, Caleb Rowe, to be an unreliable witness and a proven flight risk. Judge Sterling ruled, his voice booming. Temporary sole legal and physical custody of the minor child is awarded to the petitioner. Peyton Smith, Mr. Rowe is granted 0 visitation rights pending the completion of a 6-month psychological evaluation and a forensic audit of his assets. Your Honor, Blanton protested weakly. Furthermore, the judge continued, ignoring him, a permanent restraining order is issued. Mr. Rowe is to remain 500 yards away from the petitioner and the child at all times. Any violation will result in immediate incarceration. Regarding the financial matters, the court upholds the validity of the trust's abandonment clause. Mr. Rowe is ordered to vacate all properties held by the trust within 24 hours. He is also ordered to pay child support based on his imputed income potential. Effective immediately, the gavel came down. Bang! It sounded like a gunshot. Court is adjourned. The room erupted into movement. Darlene was sobbing loudly in the back row, not for her son, but for her lost lifestyle. Brielle was already gone, having slipped out the side door when Sloane started talking, likely racing to delete her social media history. Caleb stood alone at the table. He looked stripped, the veneer of the successful CEO, the mask of the family man, the arrogance of the husband. It was all gone. He was just a man in a rumpled suit with no ride home. He looked up and saw me. I was gathering my files. calm and methodical. He walked toward the bar, stopping at the wooden gate that separated us. The bailiff stepped forward to block him, but I raised a hand. I wanted to hear it. "Peyton," he said. His voice was cracked. "We were a team. Remember the Smith Row team? We can fix this. I can change. Don't do this to the family." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had spent 5 years trying to please. I looked at the man who had made me feel small so he could feel tall. "We were never a team, Caleb," I said. "I was the foundation. You were just the tenant." "But I loved you," he pleaded, tears finally spilling down his cheeks, tears of self-pity. "I know I messed up with the money, but you are priceless to me." I picked up my bag. I looked him dead in the eye. "You only recognized my value when you realized I had a price," I said. "And you couldn't afford me." I turned my back on him. "Peyton!" he screamed as the bailiffs moved in to escort him out. "Peyton." I walked out of the courtroom doors and into the cool night air of Rainford. Marianne was waiting for me. She didn't say anything. She just nodded. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain, but for the first time in days, it didn't feel cold. It felt clean. It felt like washing the slate clean. I did not celebrate. I did not go out for champagne. I went home to Stonevale Ridge. I walked into the nursery. I picked up my son. I sat in the rocking chair and held him until the sun came up over the mountains. I had dismantled a life to save a future. It was a heavy thing to do. But as I looked at his sleeping face, I knew I would do it 1,000 times over. 5 years later, the rain in Rainford is a constant. But you learn to live with it. You learn to dress for it. I stood on the corner of 5th and Main, adjusting the collar of my trench coat. I was on my way to the headquarters of the Smith Foundation. We had just opened our 3rd shelter for women escaping financial abuse. My life was busy. It was full. It was mine. My son, now a curious, energetic 5-year-old named Julian, was holding my hand. He was pointing at a massive digital billboard on the side of the Transit Authority building. "Look, Mommy," he said. "It is you." I looked up. The billboard was an advertisement for the foundation. It featured a black and white portrait of me, looking strong and serene, with the tagline, "Strength has no price tag." "Yes, it is," I smiled, squeezing his hand. The traffic light turned red, and the crosswalk signal chirped. A delivery bicycle pulled up to the curb next to us. The rider waiting for the light to change. He was wearing a yellow rain slicker and a heavy backpack branded with a food delivery app logo. He was soaking wet, shivering slightly in the damp chill. He looked up at the billboard. He stared at my face, 10 feet tall and looking down on the city. Then, he looked down at the sidewalk and saw us. Our eyes met. Caleb Rowe looked older. His hairline had receded. The sharp jawline was softer, buried under the puffiness of fatigue. He looked like a man who had lived 1,000 hard days since the last time he sat in a luxury car. There was no anger in his eyes anymore. There was no scheming. There was just a vast, hollow emptiness. He was a man who had held the world in his hands and thrown it away for $20. He looked at Julian. He saw the boy's bright eyes, his warm coat, his happy smile. He opened his mouth as if to say something, maybe a name, maybe an apology, but then the light changed. The walk signal beeped. I did not stop. I did not speak. I did not acknowledge the ghost of my past. I simply tightened my grip on my son's hand and stepped off the curb. We walked past him. I kept my head high, my eyes forward. I left him there, straddling a bicycle in the rain, stuck between the image of the woman he lost and the reality of the life he earned. I didn't need to say a word. My silence was the final sentence, and I had already served my time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of betrayal, justice, and the ultimate reclamation of self-worth. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a rainy city like Rainford, or somewhere with a bit more sunshine? Please leave a comment below and let me know. I love reading your thoughts. If you enjoyed Peyton's story and want to hear more tales of karma being served cold, please make sure to subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and remember, never let anyone treat you like a discount.